Here we are. So, welcome to Thursdays at 11 QT Conversations. As I've told you before, it's the highlight of my week because I get to explore topics in tutoring with some of the best tutors I know. And what's lovely is because we keep coming back, we get to know each other. And so these become ongoing conversations. And I'm enjoying so much finding out what you think and what your lives look like. But I can tell you that this week of all weeks, I majorly appreciate you participating in this conversation because you are all flat out busy. So this session is being recorded in May, mid-May, which means that it is all about exams right now. The GCSE students are underway with exams. A levels is coming up shortly after that, I believe. And even the near peer tutors, the undergrads and postgrads, are doing their exams at the moment as well. So this is exam season. And the fact that you guys have come to participate in some professional development, in some higher level thinking, and sort of step back from the day-to-day of tutoring and reflect on the tutoring practice as a whole feels very, very powerful to me. And I think that the theme of trust absolutely lends itself to that moment because we being the trusted adults in the lives of our students is more urgent now than ever. Why? Because exams are thresholds, aren't they? So they are great big scary life moments and they unlock doors. They feel big, big, big for our students. And no matter how much we, as parents and as tutors, say, life is long and there are so many routes into the career that you may want to choose and so many careers that you may well choose in your life. These exams do not define you. We know that for them, it feels like the biggest and most important thing they've ever done. And being that safe person alongside them is a privilege, is a responsibility, and is possibly slightly terrifying. So let's kick off with that concept of being a trusted adult. I'd love to hear, Sue, from you first, if you wouldn't mind.
Um, yeah, it is a bit scary. They come in very anxious, and our job is to send them out at the end of an hour much less anxious. But I think it's really important to be honest with them. And like you, I think emphasizing, and I'm sure I've said this before, I always say to my students, I go to the New Forest every year. I have the choice of going down the M3, which is fast but boring, we're going down the A3, which takes a bit longer, but it's very pretty. But the end goal, I'm still, I end up in my caravan in the New Forest, and that life is a bit like that. And I think getting that message across is important. But as I was saying earlier, I think it's also really important that they know that the exams are designed for them to showcase what they know. They're not some horrible trick, and to understand that each question is looking for a particular skill, and just to take a deep breath and think, what do they want me to show that I know?
Yeah, I say it to my children as well, and I used to say it in the classroom. Sometimes the joy of showing what you know is its own reward. If you've done the work and if you've engaged with the material, it's actually a lovely moment where you actually get to find what's in there. You know, you sort of get to perform. And that putting a positive spin on that can be really, really healthy. Do they buy it?
Mostly. But I think that comes back to what the theme of today's talk is, and trust. By
Ah,
the time we've got to May, my students have known me for what, 8, 9 months. And they know that I will tell them you know, if the work isn't up to scratch, I won't be brutal, but I will say, you can do this better. Let's have a look. Let's see what we can do. And
You
if
want some yum yums?
Ozzy, we're really, really happy to have you here. And we would love yum yums, but I am going to keep you in case they're not for everyone. Feel free to unmute yourself and turn the camera on when you're ready. Sue, I'm going to pause you there, but I'm coming back to lots of the points that you've just touched on. Thank you.
Yep.
And Tina and Ozzy, because you're new here, I'm just going to let you know that we invite you to jump in at any point. Hi, welcome. So Tina, do you want to have a go? I can see that you're poised to speak. Do you have any thoughts
Oh,
on the role of being the trusted adult?
oh well, I think there's been a big change. I think I've always felt I've developed. That's one of the things that I really am proud of over the years since I began tutoring. Being able to sort of, I think that's pivotal anyway. I think if that rapport, that trust has to be there, or you don't, it doesn't work. But I found, I don't know if anybody else has found this, but since COVID, I think it impacted a lot on children and it affected the social skills. And a lot of parents have said they're concerned about that. And I think it's like this trust. I think that trust is, they're having to claw that back. And I've felt that on a one-to-one sometimes. And it's like they're just not used to having that caring and concerned adult, which I find quite concerning in itself, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
That they don't, they don't feel they can trust the person that's teaching them. And that is, it upsets because I'm quite a caring person, and I want to do the best I can and help students. And it's like that barrier there, and it's something I've noticed only since COVID in the last year.
Claire, does it resonate with you what Tina's saying?
Sorry, I'm just trying to unmute. Yeah, I've got 3 kids. Since COVID, their mental well-being has just plummeted.
Yes.
I'm having, ongoing issues. But even with the students and stuff, I think with this trust, I don't know whether they get this at school. I've taught in the school, so I know what it's like.
Yeah.
When you've got that one-to-one, it's 100%, you've got to be honest.
Yes.
Absolutely. 100% honesty. And that feedback, I try and give feedback and say, right, and if the kid, like if they're not going to do well, I kind of program it and plan it that we just focus on the simple things so that they can get that confidence as well. So I think trust and confidence links together.
Yes.
I think that's true. And I think also there's that piece about honesty. And so confidence that's actually grounded in reality becomes really important. Emma, I know that you have a lot of feelings on that subject. Go ahead.
I feel like we talk about the same thing every week, Julia. It is about that honesty and being honest with the parent and honest with the child. And I must admit, I was quite brutal with one of my students yesterday because she just wasn't, the exam was this morning and she still wasn't reading the questions. She still wasn't, I was like, you can do better than this.
Yeah.
And I was really honest with her and said, if you do that tomorrow morning, you're going to fail. And she looked at me and it wasn't a look of, oh my God, you've just like been really brutal to me. It was, oh, you're being honest. Like teachers don't have the freedom to be honest like that. So I think when students hear it, they're like, this is new. This is, but it helps you build that relationship. And as you know, Julia, honesty for me is the key for everything.
Yeah.
Whether it's the parent relationship, whether it's the student relationship, whether it's business relationships, if you're not honest, that's what causes problems.
Yeah,
indeed.
I hear you, but I think that distinction between, teachers don't have the freedom to be this honest. It's not just being able to say it, it's being able to know that it's going to land. Yeah. So Sue was saying they've known me for long enough. They know when I say it, I'm not angry. I'm not tired. I'm saying what they need to hear.
Yeah. But when I say the teachers don't have the freedom, like when you've got 250 students through your classroom every day, you can't build the relationship in that way. Therefore, you can't have those honest conversations. You can't have that freedom to be like that with them. Whereas we know them a lot better.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully put. And that's, I think, what Tina's getting to as well. That point about we know them better and we have the freedom to get to know them better. And actually we align closer with the parents in that way because we know them almost, we get to know them in ways that maybe the parents even don't know them. And I find that interesting as well. Claudine, what are your thoughts about the trust relationship with students? Oh, I've got so many good notes here.
I've had a few slightly different experiences to everyone else.
Please share.
I every year I seem to get at least one student who comes to me desperate because their teacher's told them that they're going to fail. So the teacher's been brutally honest, but it's always the same thing. It's always one of the ones who's in a lower set because they're just not that mathematically inclined, but they're stuck in a set with all the students with behavioural issues.
Mm.
So the poor teachers, they're firefighting all the time, trying to maintain control. And those that want to learn don't really have a chance. And then I suspect it's actually the same teacher that this has happened with several years running with different students. But it seems like it comes to after the mocks in February, and it's a disaster for everyone. And they just say, well, you're going to fail. And I find that, well, I find it quite upsetting, really, because the ones that I see, they're quite capable of getting a 4 on the foundation paper. They just needed a bit of encouragement and, to get their confidence back.
It
which is
occurs to me
shattered.
that what that teacher was actually saying is, I'm going to fail you.
Yeah, that is what it translates to. Yeah.
And the word fail is quite demotivating in itself anyway, if you've actually said
Yeah,
that word.
it is. Yeah.
Although Emma used that word yesterday, and she used it really intentionally, and we may well find out that the student pulled a finger out this morning.
It comes back to knowing the student, though, doesn't it?
That's right.
Indeed.
There are some students, there is no way I would have said that to them. But
Yeah.
this student, like, she thrives on banter, she thrives on honesty, she thrives on. So for them, for that student, that worked. Using the word fail gave her the shock she needed to reboost her. Whereas the student that Claudine's talking about, I would assume from my own experience teaching bottom sets, is one of those students that's quiet and would be destroyed by that comment. And therefore you wouldn't, it's knowing your student. And again, that teacher has got 240 students coming through their class.
Did they just
They
lose 10?
can't.
They had 250 last time. Did you just lose 10?
Oh, did I just lose 10? It's around about that figure. Depends on your school. We're talking bottom sets
They're the
with
ones
less
in
students, isn't it?
isolation.
You've only got 15 in a bottom set. You've got 34 in a top. But yeah, like if you've got that many students in your room, you can't know them that well. You can't.
Something interesting just occurred to me this week. So my 14-year-old daughter has just been moved to the top set in science. And she says, I know, right? And she says, it's really weird. It's like everyone wants to learn in this group. And what occurred to me is she didn't know because she'd never been in top set. So she didn't know that it was different to second set, right? Those kids in bottom set think that every math lesson is a circus. They don't know that when you get higher up and people are actually concentrating on the material, it's much quieter. So they haven't even got any context for what a different kind of maths lesson could look like. That's an interesting thing. Nicola, we've not heard from you yet. And I would love to hear about not just being the trusted adult, but actually moments where there's breakdown in trust. Do you have any of those ideas for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one, isn't it? And it does, as Emma was saying, boil down to those individual relationships that you build with students over time. I've noticed that a few students this year, more than previous years, are the self-sabotage in the language that they're using. And I've been calling them out on it and just saying, you are totally self-sabotaging here. Why are you doing this? Because you are A, very capable, B, you've shown me in the past that you can do these things, but you've got yourself into some kind of panic spin. So let's just slow it down.
Is that a skill that you've always had, to identify self-talk and, really that's mental health support, that?
Yeah, I mean, I've recently been involved in coaching elements that are really interesting, and I have found coaching quite difficult, and mentoring is my natural comfort zone.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, it's been really powerful and impactful for me to step away and allow the time and the space in the pause, so that the students can articulate a little bit more. Initially, they'll say, I don't know, but then they get there. and that's been useful. But then I know I've taught them and tutored them long enough to be able to call them out on the sabotage and what they can then do about it. It's a tricky one to then make myself ask the coaching question, what can you do about it, rather than me make suggestions. But I've found that really useful.
I think that's really helpful that you've brought in the element of coaching, because there's a lot of trust in that pause. There's a lot of trust in silence, where you're waiting for somebody else to do their own thinking and you're giving them the freedom and the opportunity to do that. You know, we know the statistics that a teacher in a classroom waits 0.7 seconds, but actually 3 seconds is what you need for actual thinking, for deep thinking and coming up with new ideas. So do we give our students in a tutoring context more freedom to trust themselves? Do we give them more trust? Yeah, to do their own heavy lifting. Dee, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so, definitely on that. Sorry, go on. Does somebody want to jump in?
I've students, I call my students out when they answer a question from me with, is it this? I say, well, what do you think? And then getting to them to a place where, when you give me an answer, I would like you to make it a statement. And then they are, I'm glad you brought that up, they're now trusting themselves.
Yeah, that's exactly what
so the self-confidence is wrapped up in them trusting themselves to know it. So and most of my students will always answer a question, so what is 2 + 4? And they'll say, well, is it this? And I'll go, well, what do you think? And then get them to, they say, well, yeah, I think it is. I say, so why is it? And now we're asking them to dig a bit deeper, and they're now revealing to themselves that they do actually have that understanding. They can actually explain why.
This is getting really juicy now. So
and I'm going to have to run away now, sorry, because I'm teaching shortly, but I'm glad I got to contribute.
So am I. Mary Myatt's high challenge, low threat, is a really interesting concept. High challenge, low threat is how we build confidence in students. Yeah. High challenge, low threat is how students learn to have a go and trust themselves. And we, providing material that is high challenge, low threat, as opposed to what often happens in the classroom, unfortunately, and often with exams, which is low challenge, high threat. Yeah. So all of a sudden, we have the opportunity to create this stretch in students where they start discovering what they can do. But they have to trust us not to create a threatening environment or to create a safe culture where they can have a go. Does that resonate?
Yeah, that actually reminds me that the use of the word safe is very powerful. You know, obviously big emphasis on safeguarding, but I remember that really stuck in my mind when I was training to be a primary teacher. That the main responsibility, the main role of the teacher is to provide a safe and stimulating environment.
You know what? There are so many environments that our young people spend time in that do not feel safe. They don't feel safe. They feel overwhelming. They feel scary. They feel threatening, and it breaks my heart. I think we can all resonate. I would love to talk about. Well, let me tell you a cute story before we move on. So my 16-year-old, who has just done his fourth GCSE, is working with 3 qualified tutor members, and that's because his school attendance at the moment is about 30%, or was until exams started, and we needed to get him through this year. And we were talking on the way to an exam the other day about his older brother, our 18-year-old, who was in the COVID year for GCSEs. So his results were all teacher assessed grades. And he did okay. And my number 2 said, if that had been me, that would have been the worst thing ever. Because with 33% attendance, what could my teacher grades have said? Yeah, I wouldn't have had a chance. I said to him, what do you think your tutors would have graded you? And he said, maths would have been, no, he said English would have been a 9. Maths, well, she's realistic, so an 8. And science, I don't know, maybe a 7 or an 8. So yeah. So I think what's really interesting about that is that he has a sense that his tutors know him in a way that his teachers haven't had an opportunity to. What does that sound like to you guys?
Very true. You can't get to know everyone in your class, and they all learn differently. And this is why I can't emotionally teach kids, because I just want to teach, but you can't when there's a big group and you want to get to know them. Which is why I love tutoring, because you get to know that student. I've had one student for 5 years. He's doing his GCSEs. Oh, it's gonna be sad because I tutored his sister as well, and it's actually sad to come to an end. I'm gonna miss them, you know.
Relationship.
Yeah, and you just don't get that teaching.
You guys have to forgive me. I've got a returning GCSEer at the door. Please.
Oh.
I've got to let him in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I often think about all the students that I've taught over the years, last 25 years, and that there's an ocean of people out there that I don't see, but I know they're there, you know, all the students that have moved on. In fact, I saw a student that I taught about 15 years ago, and he was only 8 when I was teaching him. And then I saw him about 5 years later, and I was unrecognisable. He was a tall 19-year-old, you know.
And they come up and go, "All right, miss," and I'm like, "Huh? Who are you?" Sorry, I was in the local pub down the road, and I've got students that live around, and they come up. They're the twins, and they come up and they put their arm on my head, you know, and it's just so nice. It's like, and then I got other ones where I realised the dad was. I was tutoring the daughter of one of the dads in there. You know, it's like, and you just.
But it's interesting when you see them in a different context. It's strange, isn't it? You know them so well, but it's strange to see them outside or somewhere different.
Yeah.
Okay, let me push you further. So,
yeah,
they have to trust that you care about them. And that's exactly what you're saying here, Tina and Claire, about you see them when they grow up and you have that yummy feeling. They also have to trust that you can get them where they need to go.
And be realistic with where they can go.
And actually know what you need to know, because let's say, for example, Nicola, Emma, you've taken on tutors that you're working with. Yeah. There's a trust piece in that, in terms of, are the tutors going to be competent to take the students where they need to go? It's an important question.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got to have the confidence in that it's, you know, the basic things like the correct specification and all of those kind of things. And these are conversations I have with parents in terms of my in-house training and all that kind of thing, as well as the positives of the matching the tutor and the student and building that really positive learning relationship that a lot of teenagers thrive from, that we're really finding is super positive. Because they're, as you say, they're closer. You used an interesting phrase that I haven't really used before.
Near peer.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah. Really
So for me, I think that's really important, that, you know, building trust and a trustful relationship with a student is not merely getting on well with them or getting to know them. It's also being able to take them where they need to get to, being able to deliver on their expectation. And as you just said, the first port of call with that is the parents, because your first conversation is almost always with the parents. So how do you jumpstart a relationship of trust with a parent?
A lot of it goes on reputation referral, I think. Chatting, parents, talking. Obviously, as well in your marketing, various other things. But my primary organic growth has been parents talking with parents.
Emma?
Talking to the parents when they come to you. My conversation, I always book a call before I've booked any student on. And my first question is, tell me everything about you, your family, your child, why you've come to us. And I let them talk, because they don't get that opportunity with educators very often. So I let them talk, and then I help in any way I can. Sometimes that is by directing them to our tutors, and sometimes that is directing them away from our business, which is what I did with one the other day. We weren't the right fit, so I sent her away and told her where to go instead.
Isn't that an awesome piece of trustworthiness to not take the work?
Mm.
Go ahead, Claire.
No, I'm the same. You've got to get to know, listen to them, and then assess. It's like with my business, so they come and go, I want this, I want that, and I'm like, well, we don't do that, but I know someone that can.
Yeah.
And I don't ever push the sales because it's got to fit.
Yeah.
But what they want has got to fit.
Yeah.
And I might not have that, but I know someone that does, sort of thing.
Yeah. For me, when you say listen and when Emma says, talk with them, it sort of makes my heart thump because with my mummy hat on, I know how vulnerable I feel when I turn to a tutor. I know how much I need somebody to help my child and how high stakes that feels. Sue, what are your thoughts on that?
I think yes, you have to listen to what the parents say, and quite often the first thing that you're doing is reassuring parents, because they don't, some of them come to us just because they've got high achievers and they want them to achieve even more, but the vast majority of the students I get are because parents are concerned their child isn't going to meet the desired outcomes. So there's a lot of listening and soothing the parents before you ever get to meet the children. And occasionally at that point, long before you've met the child, you just know that you're not going to work well with that parent.
Okay.
And I don't think I used to think it was brave saying, I don't think that my style of tuition is going to suit you. But it isn't, because if you actually take on people that want, so we've talked about I'm very reactive, very laid back. There's absolutely no point taking in somebody who wants that strict, very much scheme of work orientated tutor, because it's a miserable experience for the child. It's a miserable experience for the parent, and it will break down. And every time a placement break, I've worked too often with children who have had school placements or tuition placements that have broken down. And every time that relationship breaks down, that's a huge step back for the child.
Fantastic. So there's a strong piece of alignment that we need between what the parents' expectations are, what you intend to deliver, and crucially, what the child needs, right? And there are moments within our trustful conversation with parents when we have to remember that we're actually the experienced professional and the parent might be wrong. So, you may think that your child needs a hot-housed approach, but I can tell you that will break your child. And I will do my best to get them there with a gentler approach, right? Or as Emma says, you may think that your child's going to get a 7 in maths, but we'll all have a much better year if we can manage your expectations now, right? Or everything in between. So having the trust in yourself to assert what you know to be true, even if it's not right for the parents, and yet they're your client and they can absolutely walk down the high street and pick up a different tutor. So you have this sort of opportunity to help a student if it's the right student for you to help. It becomes complicated. Sue, what are your thoughts?
I always have to hold in my mind this is someone else's child.
Oh.
So they absolutely have the right to do what they will for their child. And there are times when you see people walk away and I think I referred a few weeks ago to a parent who wanted massively more hours than I thought their child could cope with. And that's quite sad, because I know that parent will have gone somewhere else, and without doubt, they'll have found somebody who will deliver a massive number of hours for a week or 2 weeks at the most. And the impact on that child will be hugely negative. But it is their child. And I think it is quite hard sometimes as tutors to step back and think, we might want to change the world, but actually we can only change the bits that want changing.
Very nice. Very nice. Or it's not my place. Or this is beyond my remit. I wonder whether there's a case for that in terms of supporting mental health and special educational needs. So where you guys have said that you'll pass somebody on to a different tutor if it's not within your specialism. Does that often come into the send area? So would you pass on a student to somebody else who had a better specialism in a send subject?
It depends on the special need.
Go on.
I mean, I work with children with a range of special needs. I quite like it. I find, what is the term that our friend, she's not here, is she? Uses neurospicy.
Yes, Jenna. Where's Jenna today?
I find those children more interesting. And I'm quite happy if I can crawl on the floor and do something like that. But if we are talking about like severe communication issues, that's the point at which, yes, I know my limitations and would have to say.
Yeah.
I'm also lucky though, my daughter works in a special needs school, behavioural school, SEMH, and so I'm able to pick up a huge amount of CPD and specialist knowledge through her.
So that's really interesting. For me, this conversation of trust is intentionally at the end of a long line of different discussions, because quite rightly you keep referring back to them, Sue, because when we talk about parents, it informs trust. When we talk about send, it informs trust. I think also professional development. So for us to be trustworthy tutors, we need to be taking responsibility for our own professional development. We need to go and seek out the information that we need to know, whether it's exam spec or whether it's behavioral management techniques or understanding what underlying causes there are. So Tina, can I call on you here and ask about how you make sure that you are worthy of your students, your clients' trust by continually skilling up?
I suppose I feel like in a lot of ways I've developed as a tutor organically, reading, speaking with other tutors. I belong to various groups, and just following my own instincts, I think, a lot of the time. And I think, I've got a strong sort of belief in the importance of developing that relationship, like I mentioned before. And I think really the tuition relationship only works if there's that two-way process going on. It's like any relationship. It only really works if there's that give and take. So it can be more demanding on a one. Although I think children benefit because it's one-to-one as opposed to, especially if a child's got a special educational need. But for me, I think that's something that's always been something of interest to me, because I actually specialised in, it was called remedial education when I did my training course. So I've always kept up to date with that. It's just like natural. I think I've attended training courses, whenever something's available, I'll attend it.
It strikes me that it's a mindset then, the way that
I do it. It is. I don't even know I'm doing it. I just organically, I watch documentaries, and I follow it up with, I don't know. I've got loads of books.
It's like the year one teachers.
I was looking at your background, your matrix system. I've got one exactly the same as that. I've had to get a load of boxes everything's compartmentalized. But I think, this is the thing. That is the thing. That's how I think relationships are successful. It's compartmentalizing and looking at and being self-compassionate. If you look after yourself and your own needs, you're more likely to build a strong relationship. You can't do it otherwise.
That's very lovely. Absolutely lovely. Well, I'm sorry I got excited and I spoke over you for a second there, because I was remembering my favorite year one teacher who never let an egg box pass through her hands, because she always needed to collect it for whatever project she was coming up with next.
I'm like that, a magpie.
Mountains of junk modeling resources just in case. It's a mindset, it's a way of being. But it does occur then, for those of us who are former teachers, it does occur to me that trustful role in the classroom, so how you be a trustful teacher, is not the same as how you be a trustful tutor. And some of us in this room have already said, God, it's such a relief to be able to deliver what I really want to deliver as a tutor that I couldn't deliver in the classroom. Claire, do you want to speak a little bit more to that feeling of, I wish I could give it to you as a class teacher?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I left. And I feel as a teacher, it's more behavioural management. You're spending half the lesson trying to calm down, get them sitting down. And it links back to students that have been told they're going to fail. So why should we be here? Why should we learn? We're not gonna, we're not gonna pass. So, and I had a whole class like that. To the point where two of them were fighting behind me. They had no control. I had to have people, and I'm like, I'm not in the right environment. This is not satisfying me. I'm not benefiting those kids.
I've actually heard the phrase moral injury
Yeah,
associated with
yeah,
yeah. And moral injury is a phrase that comes from the army. It comes from soldiers being asked to do things that they don't feel right about. And there's a certain element of walking away from classroom practice that you sort of reflect on that moral injury. In the smallest way, dangly earrings or black shoes and brown shoes. I, as a head teacher, had to stand at the door and talk to children about their nail varnish, and I didn't give a hoot about their nail varnish. But I am representing the rules of the school, and I must represent and be consistent in all of those things. And of course, children need, and we all need structures, but we need meaning behind those structures. Those children who are saying, what's the point? For me, much of the mental health breakdown right now is the lack of meaning behind many of our expectations.
No, totally.
So for us being a trustful adult, all of a sudden we have to say, I can't keep shouting at you about the wrong things. I need to find a way where I can actually help you. Rant over. Tricking. Right at the beginning of this conversation, Sue said, I think it was you, Sue, about the question, the examiner's not trying to trick you, not trying to catch you out. Okay, so let's go to that for a second. This idea that when you look at an exam paper, is the question writer and is the assessor on your side or not, is an interesting place for a student to consider. Go ahead, Claire.
No, I'm just this is just my total thing. It's like it's giving you clues. They're helping you identify what to answer. Like the science, it's like a diagram. Don't go straight into the answer. Look at the table, analyze the table, look at the keywords. Why have they said that in that thing? They're giving you a clue. They don't want you to fail. They're trying to like really go, look at this, this is what we want. So it's teaching the students that, and that I find teachers don't really feed back on exam questions as well as a tutor does. They don't give them the time. You might have one lesson assessing a test, but individual students need individual attention for particular questions. So it's all about knowledge is one thing, which they can just about manage to squeeze in the years of the GCSE, but it's application.
Yeah, by the spring term, they should have the exam spec in their hand all the time. They should have mark sheets in their hands all the time. Mark sheet is actually more powerful than the test itself.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm like, well, don't ignore the mark scheme. Use it and have it next to it and learn.
So I read an interesting book on child development once, and it said that one of the powerful things to teach a child is how to advocate for themselves. But being able to advocate for yourself means that you trust that the world is there to help you. Like there's two mindsets for a child. Is the world there to help you, or is the world there to catch you out? Yeah. Are the examiners there to catch you out, or are they there to help you show what you know? And having this mindset that the examiner is not against you, that the test is not there to fail you, is really profound as a place, as a way to raise children. Actually,
it's a place to show off.
Oh, lovely. I used to say to the kids, take your pencil and see what comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I be?
Oh, sorry, go on.
No. I'd just like to be devil's advocate for that, because I am hearing it feels like quite a lot of school bashing.
Yeah, well done for calling us out. Thank you.
And I have two of my three children are teachers. One works with special needs children. The other one is head of a maths department. And I see a huge amount of really good practice in the work that they do. And I also occasionally pick up students whose parents have approached one of my children and said, my child needs some extra work. Do you know a tutor? and the child will say,
Do
there is a
I
vested
know a
interest
tutor?
here, but I do know someone who can help. So I actually see not only one of my children's practice from listening to conversations with them, but also from conversations with the teachers, with the parents, sorry, and conversations with the children. And I do think there is an awful lot of good practice. And there are an awful lot of schools where low sets aren't chaotic. I always taught bottom set maths, and I loved it. I actually loved it, because to me that was a huge challenge to stop and to break. We communicate at the level that we're at very often, and to break things down into the smallest components I found massively challenging. So there are shocking schools out there. There are terrible teachers. I worked with one this year where I've sent letters into the school. It was that bad. But I do think the vast majority of teachers are highly professional and desperately want their kids to do well because it's in their interests.
Yeah. So let's just clarify. We are never bashing teachers. Some of my best friends are teachers.
Yeah, I just think
more about the system giving teachers, children, and parents their best chance to do well. Emma, go ahead.
I think it's also about what I was trying to say was acknowledging the issues that the teachers are facing. Like, I am very newly out of teaching myself, and I know that when I was in the classroom, it was really hard to go against all those things. Like we said about they should have a mark scheme in their hand by May. Well, for some schools, when they're told they can only teach maths for 6 hours a fortnight, they haven't finished the content. Like, they can't be teaching them how to pass the exam because they're stuck in a system that doesn't allow them to do what they know is right. So it's not about the teacher bashing, it's about the system is putting teachers in a position where they can't do what they want to do. And I know that's what Claire said as well. Like, when we were teachers, we wanted to do all these things, but we couldn't because we weren't allowed, or we didn't have the time, or the system wouldn't allow it. Like, it's not about teacher bashing, it's about the wider system of there is a gap, and that's what creates our job now, is that there is a gap in the system. If the system was perfect, we wouldn't be sat here.
Yeah, and I think, Sue, when you say to us that 2 out of your 3 children are teachers, firstly, good on you that you set enough of a role, model that they thought that would be a good choice. But secondly, let's make sure that they have a better experience than some of us. So our, the QT model of safe, skilled, and supported, which qualified you to make sure that tutors feel safe, skilled, and supported. But when I was a school leader, my job was to make sure that my teachers, all the adults in the building, felt safe, skilled, and supported so that they could be highly professional and deliver the best work for the students. So rather than micromanaging what they were delivering, my job was to make sure that they were in the right environment and the right culture to do their best work. So making sure that they could ask questions and felt safe about that, trusting that I wasn't going to jump down their throat or laugh or anything else. You see that with safeguarding reports, right? Should I report this? Well, the answer is always yes. If you have a safeguarding concern, the answer is always yes. But in order to make that happen, you have to have a safe culture where people know that it's safe to make a report or report a concern. Making sure that teachers feel confident to access the right skills, tutors feel confident to access the right skills, to say, I'm actually not great at teaching equivalent fractions. Can somebody sit down with me and show me how they do it? Yeah. And also supported. And for me, supported is not just having people around you to cheer you on or challenge you. It's also being that person for somebody else. So we find in these conversations, don't we, that we actually get to show what we know. And that becomes part of the joy, is we develop our own thinking by being the giver. That's who we are as educators. So building up cultures where teachers and tutors can feel safe, skilled, and supported is going to be the thing that will make a lasting difference for our students. And all of those things come down to trust as a bedrock. Can't expose what I'm not sure about unless I feel safe, unless I trust that people will help me. Claire, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know what it was like, confidence as well. When I was in school, I think there was a good team of work, and we could always talk to each other. But you've got to feel safe to say, look, I'm having a problem with this,
Yeah.
or I'm having a problem with that student, or without them then thinking, oh, you're not a good teacher, like as in the higher up people.
Yeah.
There's always that worry. I don't know, it's
because we know that only the best teacher, the most competent person, would know what they need to ask for help with, right? That's a sign of
learning, isn't it? It's a I've
learning.
come from a career of science research, and now I'm teaching. You don't know everything. You're not Google. That's what I say.
My 9-year-old knows everything.
Do you see Google written on there? Do you? So yes, I do science, but I don't know everything about science, and and I love it when my students actually or someone else brings me something I did not know. I love it.
How trustful is that for you to put yourself in the learning mode and let them show you something?
Oh, it's brilliant, and I love it, and I say, look, even I make mistakes, and being honest with that, saying, look, everyone makes mistakes, but you learn from them.
It's really important for students to sometimes see you make those genuine mistakes as well.
Yeah.
They actually learn from that process, and then they kind of go, well, you fall into the same traps, or we both were looking at that question, we both missed that earlier on. So let's go back to the exam technique. Let's highlight those keywords. Let's ask ourselves those questions. What is this question really asking me to do? How do I break that down? What are the prompts?
See, I love the way you've just described that, because I've heard tutors in training in the past say, yeah, I really don't know. And I show up in the lesson and we work it out together. And there's a limit to how trustful that is. Do you know what I mean? Like, the exception is what you're not sure about. And you're prepared to go and find the answers together. If you had a tutor who was modeling that lack of knowledge too frequently, it would veer into the side of leaving the student feeling a little bit unsure.
Definitely.
So,
but jumping into the pool of letting the student inform you about what they're interested in is a great thing. I've learned this year loads about anime and all kinds of Japanese manga stuff, because we've had that back and forth, and we've had to have this sort of packed situation where we'll focus on the physics, but can you talk to me about anime for 5 minutes first? Brilliant. Otherwise that other work won't get done. So,
and you did it first. You didn't use it as an incentive.
No, it's something that
clear his head
through the process, and we found a way through with a student who's got a whole range of various learning difficulties, and so you find a pathway that works for that student.
Okay, so that's exactly how I wanted to finish off. One technique from every tutor in this room about how to build trustful relationships with students. And I'll take from Nicola that pact of building you tell me about anime and I will tell you about science, turn-taking relationship. Sue, one top tip for building trustful relationships with students.
Specifically to my English Kent test students, obviously it doesn't work with maths. I always ask them to write a paragraph for me about the thing that interests them most, so that before we start sessions, they're telling me what their passions are. I also get to mark the work and to see what gaps we need to work with. But before we start, I already know the thing that is sort of closest to their heart.
That's lovely. And I love the focus on passion rather than hobbies. Because kids nowadays don't really have hobbies, but they do tend to have obsessions, if you ask. That's really, really lovely. Thank you. Emma?
Conversations, again, getting to know them, but more specifically, like the first lesson I have with a student, I ask them what their targets are.
Nice.
Don't want to know what the school target is, don't want to know what the parent target is, want to know what they want out of tutoring. And that starts off that trust with them, that I'm interested in them, I'm not just there being paid by their parents. I do care about what they think too.
I'm really, really curious how that makes the student feel in the moment, though. Is there a tension when you first speak to them like that?
They're usually shocked because no one's ever asked them before. And they have that moment of, it's a bit like when you're being coached. It's that feeling of, she's asking me what I think.
Oh.
And sometimes we have you can think about it and tell me at the end of the lesson.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it's like, well, actually, my target's a 7. Let's delve into that a little bit more. And you go into the coaching of, is that what you want? Is that what you're being told you need? Is that, and you go into it. And then by the end of the conversation, they're like, actually, I'd be happy with a 5, or I'd be happy with a 6, or I need a this to do this. And it actually hones them a little bit as well.
That's really
Gives them that
interesting.
motivation.
That's really interesting. So you're finding that intrinsic motivation as well by giving them that space. And thank you for tying it back to coaching. I think that was really important. Tina, we're looking at strategies for building trustful relationships. Go for it.
Well, I think it's a step-by-step process in my experience. It's something it can't just start, we're not robots, that's, I think the thing is, we've said before about that national curriculum is quite prescriptive. And I think a lot of teachers get drawn into that. They feel they have to perform, which of course then children also feel they have to go through all the loops and that, or the hoops, should I say. And I think that is what maybe over time erodes the trust in themselves for the teachers and also for the students. And that is the whole process, I think. And that is sad because I think it is about that autonomy. I was thinking that was the word that came to mind before, when we were talking about, the role of the teacher and how, that we can, if we're not careful, think it's the teacher's fault, but they're part of a system. And it is a process. The key thing which I really emphasize as a tutor is that it's a process of learning. It's not about what you learn and when and how quickly. It's about developing at your own pace. So that, I think, is the essence of developing trust, because we're not dogs. We don't jump through hoops. We don't work like that. We're all in different situations. We're all individual.
Yeah, Tina, I think what I'm hearing there is, again, it's a mindset for you, and it probably overflows from you into the way that your students work with you, and sometimes that can be really refreshing. I do think it's interesting where you're saying about autonomy. One of the challenges of a tutor is how much autonomy we have, and I would love to explore that with you a different time, because it's what makes tutoring lonely and scary. That we have autonomy.
It's two sides, like double-edged sword, isn't it? It's positive on the one hand, but it's managing the difficult side. It's the dark. It's like feng shui. It's the dark, integrating the dark with the light.
That's really interesting, and that's definitely what we try to do here in QT, is build those structures so that we don't feel like we're free falling. But I do think, because tutoring needs to say, we need to have the freedoms to go to where our students are and deliver different things. Everybody in this room does things differently. We need to find a way to build ways of doing things that don't restrict us but do support us. Claudine, what are your thoughts about strategies for building trustful relationships?
Well, I agree with what Emma was saying. I think especially for GCSE and A-level students, the first session I have with them, I like to start off with more of a conversation rather than me being like a teacher and talking at them. I think it's really important to set off on that path where you have a conversation. It's two ways, and you find out how they're feeling about, in my case, it's maths, and what they hope to achieve through tutoring, whether it's scraping a 4 or they're desperate to get a 9, whatever it is they want. And, as Emma said, making sure that you know what they want as opposed to what their parents want.
Yeah.
Because they're not always the same thing. And, if you understand what they want and why they want it, so they they only need a 4 or 5 because they're going to go on to A levels and in humanities subjects, then you think in those terms. Whereas if they're planning to be an architect, that they're going to have to knuckle down and get those top grades. So so I think it also helps understanding where they're wanting to go, because you can relate the material to where it's going to come in later on.
So that's very interesting, isn't it? That future planning and that sort of sense of what is the purpose here, the longer term purpose here. It occurs to me that role of the facilitator, and there's a sort of power balance shift, isn't there, in that conversation that both of you are talking about. Claire, we're running out of time. Go for it.
Well, I'm kind of agreeing with everybody, to be honest. I think you need to build that
just a tail
and let them talk to you so you know where they're coming from.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to wrap up because we're 1 minute over. I want to thank you for participating. I want to thank you for carving out this time in the busiest weeks of your professional life to have these conversations. And I think that we all agree that they are pushing thinking forward. And sometimes we're saying things that feel obvious to us, but the fact that they're not obvious to everyone means that we are lifting and sort of exposing the mechanics of tutoring. And I find that fascinating to do with you. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Sue. Thanks, Claudine. Thanks, Tina. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Claire. And thank you to Dee, who was here earlier. Thanks, everyone on LinkedIn. Lots of love. Have a great weekend. Bye. Bye.